Hey everyone, just me. Hey Roy, just give me one moment. I have to log out and come back in. There we go. Get used to it. Hi Roy, are you there?
Oh, yeah, Georgia's here as well.
Awesome. It's hard for me to see her, and I just see your name on the screen. So,
Yeah, she's over here in the corner.
but how are you both faring out there?
Hmm? Yeah, we're doing well here. At least we have the beach.
Okay. All right. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Awesome. So, hi Sarah.
Hi.
So, still here in the office. It's incredibly quiet around here, as you can imagine.
Yes.
And I'm glad you're able to join me today to read a little bit of the book of Judges.
Good.
And hopefully we'll be able to dive in. Did you get a chance to take a look at the, I sent a handout perhaps that came with it too, or that was my religious school one. Forgive me. You'll see a copy of it in a second.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because it wasn't there.
All right, no worries. So we'll jump in.
I just took a look at my Socino book of Judges and read the introduction, which was kind of hard to follow.
Okay. Do you have a copy of the JPS annotated Tanakh?
Yes, I do, actually.
Okay. Let me grab it's. Sorry, it's called the Jewish Study Bible.
Oh, I don't.
No, we had the Tanakh.
Oh, you have the Tanakh. Okay.
I have the Tanakh with the newest translation, I know.
Oh, okay. Got it. So there's also this one, which has the newer translation in it as well. This one, I think it was done by Bretler, who's now in North Carolina. He was in Boston before that. Yeah, the editor is Adele Berlin and Mark C. Bretler. And what's nice about this one is, one, it, for better or worse, it only has the English translation.
Yeah,
it's got copious commentary on it, kind of like the Hertz Chumash and others, and like the Cincinos. So there's a lot of just cultural references, modern interpretations, and really just tries to unpack it. And the other book that I like to use as a commentary is Alter, of Robert Alter from Berkeley. And he loves to take a literary approach to all of Tanakh. His books are always in English, easily accessible, and his commentary is always commenting on the language that's used.
Yes.
That's inside, which is, I think, pretty cool. So that's just two things I can put out there as far as other book research. I have a copy of.
How about Alter? Have you looked at Alter? I think he's completed now the whole Tanakh.
Yes, he did, and he was also on one of the podcasts I listened to a while ago, and interviewed about that process of finally publishing it. Whether it was either Judaism Unbound or Unorthodox that he was on, and I can search through my notes to find that for you.
I just have his book on Psalms. It's the only one I have.
Got it. So before he finished everything, he actually published a lot of his works in smaller volumes. So I do have a copy somewhere, and we just organized my office, and I still can't find it, of just the early books of the prophets. So it's obviously in there, and if I can find it, I'll be very happy because it really gives, again, another literary level to the text reading. And I would have liked it when I was preparing this, but I'll have it for the next session.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're good. So I, post here, if we think about the structure, so what I love about the book of Judges is that you don't have to read a lot of it to actually get a good understanding of what's inside. Unlike other books of the Bible where you really have to read the entire book for a scene to end, here you can really just read the life and trials of one individual, and that could be a chapter, could be 2 verses, and that's it sometimes. So the leadership that falls in Judges, I would say, falls into these 4 categories of military, lone warriors, prophets, and priests, and sometimes there's a little bit of overlap. So under military leader, there's Othniel. Othniel, I think, is one of my, I would like to say one of my favorites, because he's one of the first, but is relatively a quick one, and we're going to take a look at him. Ehud is the one we're going to read in greater detail today, and it's the one I actually enjoy starting with the most because he is just, I think, when I'm teaching teens and adults, to me, it's one of the more engaging stories that we're going to approach. Yiftach, here's Jephthah, is actually a Haftorah that's in the summer, and my wife read it actually when it occurred, and what we realized is that in the Haftorah it actually ends with a really awesome cliffhanger. So we'll have to get to that one another time. Shamgar we could do in all of it.
He's the one who said that he actually ended up killing his daughter.
Exactly. That he's going to kill the next person who walks through his door, pretty much, and that's where the Haftorah ends. And you don't know that his daughter is the next verse. Ever in the text, it's obviously there, and you accomplish it. So again, that's one of the reasons why I happen to like that as a great comparison. It's kind of showing you the rabbinic mindset to say, we need to take a moment here and we don't need this. We don't need this family conflict that's going to happen. We'll stop here. And feel free to stop me in case. So, and Shamgar is interesting because he's really one verse. So it's, I think, interesting, why is he there? You'll notice that Samuel occurs twice, as he's both a prophet and also a priest. Eli and Samuel, we would see later on, is also there. Eli shows up in the book of Samuel, so we see the connectivity of timelines. And we also have Samson, who's the Nazir, the Nazarite, who has if we were to compare his story to other biblical births as well, we can see some really interesting parallels that this might actually be just a motif that exists in ancient Near Eastern literature. So we'll press on. So this is the page that I shared to the religious school families, which I can happily email you. It's just from giantbiblemaps.com. And it gives us the chronology of the book of Judges. And, if we start off with Amiel here in the beginning, here's Ehud. The picture explains so much of what we'll get a chance to read. And it's, this one I'm not so sure about the timeline in a way, but it gives us the idea that, first of all, some of the books are actually concurrent of the Bible, and some of them are actually chronologically different. Again, with the idea of Eli and Samuel, well, if we're really reading them as a time frame, we know that Samuel shows up later as a book, and how could Eli be in 2 books at the same time? It means the time overlaps. As you can see here by the orange coloring of Eli and Samuel. Okay, next slide. So we're going to jump in. You missed it with our first JTS class. The professor loved calling on himself to read. But as long as I have my water, which is still full, we should be good. So if we start off here, after the death of Joshua, the Israelites inquired of the Lord, which of us shall go be the first to go and up against the Canaanites and attack them? So we're still in this mode of conquest. We know that there has to be this power shift after Joshua, since he didn't really name a successor. Now everyone's coming up to God. And so the Lord replies, no, let the tribe of Judah go up and I'll deliver the land into their hands. Now, Judah doesn't do it by themselves, as we read on. Judah turns to their brother tribe, Simeon and Shimon, says, come up with us, a lot of territory, and let us attack the Canaanites, and then we'll go with you to your allotted territory. So, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Let's go do this together. I'll take a quick pause here for a moment. That what I would like to do, and I didn't get a chance to do it for this, could be for a future class, is to compare this kind of relationship of the tribes that occur in the book and throughout the books of the prophets to what we see in Genesis, and looking for parallels of relationships between Judah and Simon and Shimon. What are the relationships there that are paralleled? Because to me, it starts to beg that question of which came first. Is Genesis really our origin story that was written first, or were the prophets what was more concurrent and written and going back and forth? I think we might see that it may not be the order that we have it is actually chronologically how things are written.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I happen to really be, and I'll put my cards out there, I'm not generally of the opinion that Genesis is our actual first historic book.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Right. And I think that if we really look at the way the book is written and a lot of the stories and the structure, it's there to set up more of the Davidic dynasty. And Judges just parallels that a little bit more. Because if we can find an older ancestor for ourselves, then to me, that means that it's got a stronger hold. If I can explain that, oh, my grandfather and your grandfather were connected, therefore you and I are kinsmen now. So if I can do that with an older story, so too will it be in the present day. And just one of the fun examples. So Judah advanced, the Lord delivered the Canaanites and the Perizzites into their hands, and they defeated 10,000 of them at Bezek. At Bezek, they also encountered Adoni-Bezek, engaged him in battle, and defeated the Canaanites and the Perizzites. Great biblical language. We're going to write something frontways, and then we have to say the exact same thing backwards. Adoni-Bezek fled, and they pursued him and captured him. They cut off his thumbs and his big toes. Biblical torture. Another great thing of encountering and things I think we gloss over too much because there's so much juiciness, I think, in these kinds of things. Why do we need to note this?
Yeah.
We read on. But Adoni-Bezek said, 70 kings with thumbs and big toes cut off used to pick up scraps under my table, as I have done. So God has requited me. And they brought him to Jerusalem, and he died there. It's just desserts. It's this cyclical mentality that exists in Jewish history and in ancient Near Eastern thought, that we need to, if we act a certain way, then that we get the rewards that are reaped with that. And if things go backwards, well, you don't get those kinds of things. Looks like we have someone else joining us. Perhaps. Not sure. Anything before we move on? No.
No.
Okay. So I will.
Is there supposed to be something with the thumbs and the big toes?
Well, other than that, that's what he did.
Well, I understand DNF, but is that supposed to mean
It's like
the,
scallops.
the controlling part of your hand and the controlling part of your foot?
Yeah, so I think you're right on there.
I don't know.
You don't have your opposable thumbs, you don't have your toes. I think we actually miss out on a great deal. You can't grasp anything if you only have the four. You really need that thumb in order to, grab a mug or grab something.
Sword.
Yeah, here, I'm actually trying to do it right now. I'm going to drop it. Having half of a thumb, it's not even helpful. So I think that it's really a demonstration of power for him. You're taking away from an individual their own ability to control their destiny, in one sense.
Okay.
So we press on, and the Judites attacked Jerusalem and captured it. They put it to the sword, set the city afire. Love the fact here that Jerusalem is now ablaze, which is our future home. And after the Judites went down and attacked the Canaanites who inhabited the hill country, the Negev and the Shephelah, the Judites marched against the Canaanites who dwelt in Hebron as they defeated Shishai, Achiman, and Talmai. I personally love putting these things in Hebrew. It's easier to read for me. Which I didn't do here. I have to remember that for the future. So the name of Hebron was formerly Kiryat Arba. So, and if you look at the next verse, and they marched against the inhabitants of Devere, and the name of Devere was formerly Kiryat Shefer, and Caleb then announced, I will give my daughter Achash in marriage to the man who attacks and captures Kiryat Shefer, his younger kinsman, Othniel the Kenzanite, captured it and gave Caleb his daughter Achsah in marriage. So the two things in parentheses are taken straight out of the text. They're not mine. And it goes to show this idea that there should be a connection of things that were in the past, present, and future. So I just advanced here because, again, in this verse 23, it's on the right-hand side, the house of Joseph was scouting at Bethel, and the name of the town was formerly Luz. So again, we have the editor who's going to jump in and add some ideas to help people understand, well, this is what we call it today. It was known as something else. How can we acknowledge those changes that happen?
Is this the same Caleb that appears all
So
earlier in the Torah?
right. So if we think from a timeline perspective for a moment, we know that Caleb was also with Joshua,
right,
as the real secondary leader in the scout. So it might very well have been that this is that case here. So when she came to him, she induced him to ask her father for some property. We've got the transfer of lands. Now, land ownership here is actually obviously a big deal, like in most places. Prior to this, if you think about the stories again in Genesis, we're a nomadic people, and here we want to settle down. We want to have roots. So we need to establish as much historical credibility for that space. So if we look at, don't believe it was verse 23, but, oops, sorry. Where's my pointer? Here we go. So we find the descendants of the Kenites. Sorry, so that was a circle. Canaanite, we see the father-in-law of Moses. So here we have a case right now of that, what I was talking about before, of trying to establish our credibility with an ancestor. We know that when Moses was out in the wilderness, he came, he met Jethro as he was shepherding and in his own land. Now, and here that is. And if we think about also how he's referred to in Shemot, he's also referred to as the Midianite. And how here's the Canaanite. And we have different terms that are often used like this. Again, and the goal is trying to expand that piece. It also could just be a corruption of it, which I didn't mention before, but for Adoni Bezek, might actually have been Adoni Tzedek, which is, again, it's when you're using an oral language and you're sharing thoughts, things might not always have been transcribed properly. And it could have been part of that thing. So,
Caleb must have been a couple of 100 years old.
yeah, well, he also could have been his grandson too, and it just, was a shared name.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think that that's another conversation that we could have over the time frame. One of the biblical commentators of Ibn Ezra, he has a line that is absolutely my favorite. It's Ein mukdam v'muchar b'tanach. There is no early and there is no late. And he has this idea when he interpreted it that there are some things which this time frame didn't work here. So as a result, we're going to move that elsewhere. And if we keep shifting it around, we can come up with a bunch of gobbledygook that doesn't mean anything. But I don't think that's the case. I think we sometimes have to look at it with a fine-tooth comb and say, you know what, you're right. This piece here, the story of Caleb and Joshua ben Nun, it doesn't maybe fit so well with Moses at such a young stage, but perhaps it was something later, or maybe there were two Calebs and we've now conflated it because it made more sense. I'm just going to leave that open at the moment. I just advanced the slide here, and I'm trying to remember where I put this one because I thought I put something else here instead.
Okay.
We see that this is why this one's here. If we look at the first line, the Israelites settled among the Canaanites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. Okay, so we're now mixed in with everybody else. They took their daughters to wife and gave them their own daughters to their sons, and they worshipped their gods. Now we get the problem. We get the problem of living in this land, that it's acculturation, it's assimilation, it's what we've been trying to change for so many years. And the Israelites did what was offensive to the Lord. They ignored the Lord their God and worshipped the Baalim and the Asherot. This lack of proper worship is common, and it is the reoccurring theme throughout Judges.
I understand this, but I don't understand why you talk about the father-in-law of Moses, who was not Jewish, who was not, right? Didn't he marry an Egyptian? Midianite. So, back in chapter 1, I was just stopped there. The descendants of the Kenite, the father-in-law of Moses.
Right.
Well, so why is he here?
Exactly.
He's not, and then all of a sudden we're here and these people are no longer, we're intermarrying with them. Well, Moses already did. This is his father-in-law.
Right. So,
So why is it even?
But he didn't worship their God.
How do we know? How do I know?
Moses didn't.
I'm not talking about Moses.
But these people are.
But here he says the descendants of the Kenite. Now Moses' kids would also be the descendants too.
Yeah. So, I think if we think for a moment, you raise a great point. Right? So here he is. So Moses is the one who has to kind of explain, why is he choosing God? Adonai, the one we've all been part of as the Jewish faith, and the Israelite community. While the others are what's common in that land. And you have Jethro. You have Yitro, who, you're right, gives a lot of good advice to Moses. So there should be, something we can reward him with. But again, what is that? How far did this go in everything else? I'm stumbling over my words because I'm trying to rack at my brain right now for the best answer I can posit. And I think I'm going to go back to this idea that if we look at Genesis as not being time specific, and really being the first, I almost would say, let's take a look at Exodus and think the same thing for a moment. We are trying to conquer the land of Israel. We're trying to conquer the deserts where Jethro was originally an inhabitant. So if we align ourselves with Moses and Yitro, and the tribe that Yitro was part of for a moment, then that should give us reason to take this over and to inhabit it again. And I think that might be the piece of why we want to have the land now. The question is, if we take over this land, do we inherit the gods that were here before us? Or are we now trying to come in with something supreme, literally, and that transcends the borders? Because up until now, the Baalim, the Asherot, all of the ancient Near Eastern gods were actually specific to certain territories. And the idea of the Israelite God is that no, we have a God who transcends all of this space, all of this time, and it no longer matters whether you're in the tribe in the north or the south or another place. However, that's the theory, but the culture that's there is much more provincial. And I always forget the quote, but culture eats something for breakfast, right? And, as a professional who's worked in different organizations, you can say that you go in with the loftiest ideas, but unless the culture is one of change, if the culture is so deeply rooted, you can have the greatest ideas in the world, but they're not going to get very far. And I think that the conquering of Israel might very well be this case. So we are now dealing with these people who we were supposed to conquer. We live with them. So conquering and living could be, open to interpretation. And we've been there. I'll press on a little bit here. So the Lord became incensed at Israel. So now we got to have our payback because we didn't do something right. And surrendered them to King Cushan Rishatayim of Aram Naharaim, and the Israelites were subject to Cushan Rishatayim for 8 years. Now the Israelites cried out to the Lord, and the Lord raised a champion for the Israelites to deliver them, Othniel the Kenzanite, the younger kinsman of Caleb. Now, if I did this right, and I remember my slides correctly, we are going to see something. We see that we've been warned. So we just realized that the king Cushan was over Israel. He's a foreign king, and the land was peaceful when Othniel rose up. However, when he died, the Israelites did again what was offensive to the Lord, because they did what was offensive to the Lord let King Eglon of Moab prevail over Israel. This comes from later on. Why do I put the two things in parallel? Aside from the connection of Cushan, and why did the Israelites then become subject to him? And the answer is because also the same thing happened for Eglon, because they did what was offensive to the Lord, and we get a foreign king known as Eglon, and we were warned of this. On the next one. So Eglon brought the Ammonites and the Amalekites, again, two ancient enemies of Israel, together under his command. So we've got a foreign king, and now we've got our enemy next to us. This might not go well for us, let's be honest. Also thinking again to the future, Saul is supposed to get rid of the Amalekites. And Amalekites were also part of, just really the ever battle of Amalek as those who attacked the Israelites when they were leaving Egypt. So under the command, and then went and defeated Israel and occupied the city of Palms. The Israelites were subject to King Eglon for 18 years. The Israelites cried out to the Lord raised up a champion for them, the Benjaminite Ehud of Gera, a left-handed man. It happened to be the Israelites who sent tribute to Eglon of Moab through him. Now, I said I was going to really focus on today the reading of Eglon, and we're about to get there.
Okay.
But first, the Ammonites and Amalekites, our enemies, we were warned, okay? How are we warned about having a foreign king over us, and what does this mean for us? So we're going to jump back in Tanakh, at least the order that we have it in the canon, and we go to Deuteronomy 17. And just before we get into the land, God says to Moses, Moses says, listen away, if you, after you've entered the land that the Lord your God has assigned to you, and taken possession of it, and settled in it, you seem to have done that, and you decide, I want a king. I will set a king over me, as do all the other nations about me. Israelites shouldn't be different from everyone else. You shall be free to set the king over yourself, but it's one chosen by the Lord your God. Now, we know we can have Saul, David, Solomon. They're going to be anointed. God chooses them. And be sure to set the king as a king over yourself, one of your own people. You must not set a foreigner over you, one who is not your kinsman. Funny, we had this warning in Deuteronomy before we took over the land. Moreover, he shall not keep many horses, or send people back to Egypt to add in his horses. Since the Lord has warned you, you must not go back that way again. He shall not have many wives, lest his heart go astray, nor shall he amass silver and gold to excess. Looking at all of these key pieces for a moment, we can find cases of having too many wives. King Solomon kind of did that. We can find cases of heading back to Egypt. We can find, a bit of a heavy tax. But here, the first part and the end of the first paragraph here, about setting a foreigner. We've been warned. Why is this such a big deal? Because we need to have saviors like Ehud. We know about Ehud, first of all, that he was a Benjaminite. He also has a left hand. He's left-handed. Why on earth do these kinds of facts matter? Not so much about Benjaminite, but more so here about being a left-handed man. So as a leader of Israel, or perhaps a region of Israel, because let's just hold on for a moment that not everything is unified. People are sending tribute to Eglon because we're a vassal country right now to him. We're a vassal state. We need to make sure we appease Eglon so he doesn't do too much damage to us. So Ehud's got this job as our leader. The great part we've already read. So a little more about Ehud. He's our champion. He makes for himself a two-edged dagger, so double-sided, a gomed in length. Doing quick research as far as what a gomed is, it's probably about an amah, elbow to fingertips. So he's got a nice sword, which he girded on his right side under his cloak. Again, love the details. It matters that he is left-handed. If you think about swordsmanship, you're always going to draw across your body, not on the same side. And I'm a righty, so I'm here doing it with my right hand. And since 90% of the people in the world are right-handed, you expect it always to be on the opposite side, on the left side. But Ehud, being a lefty, could easily conceal it on his right-hand side because no one expects it there. He presents the tribute to King Eglon of Moab, and Eglon now was a very stout man. Again, a lot of interesting details because we're building up to something. We've got a left-handed man with a double-edged sword, and we've got the king who likes to eat, and on the shorter side. When Ehud had finished presenting the tribute, he dismissed all the people who had conveyed the tribute. Thank you for giving it to me. I'm going to take it from here. But he himself returned from Pessalim. He went back with them a little bit. I left my keys over at the palace. I'm going to go get them. And he says, Your Majesty, I have a secret message for you. Oh, if you've got a secret message for me, I've got to only listen to you. So let's get rid of everyone else. He gets rid of all those in attendance who have left his presence. When Ehud approached him, he was sitting alone in his cool upper chamber, and Ehud said, I have a message for you from God. Whereupon he rose from his seat, and reaching with his left hand, Ehud drew the dagger from his right side and drove it into Eglon's belly. Yeah. This was not supposed to be a clean, day. The fat enclosed over the blade, and the hilt went in after the blade, for he did not pull the dagger out of his belly, and all the filth came out. Again, the details of him being stout, a little portly. This is a somewhat large blade, presumably, and just giving us a visual as a lovely campfire kind of story of how the Israelites were successful through Ehud. Now, stepping out of the vestibule, Ehud shut the doors of the upper chamber on him and locked them up. Great details. We find the locked doors. After he left, the courtiers returned. When they saw the doors were locked of the upper chamber, they thought, he must be relieving himself in the cool chamber. Because what else would you be doing in the cool chamber? It's your own private space. Why is Ehud potentially meeting Eglon in the bathroom? I'm not quite sure. But it's a cool marble place, I'm guessing. They waited a long time. I guess a little constipation there, perhaps. And when he did not open the doors of the chamber, they took the key, opened them, and there their master was lying dead on the floor. And that is the end of Eglon. A vignette. And that's the story of Eglon. Like I said, this is all in one chapter. The reason why I love the book, we can accomplish these kinds of things relatively quickly, and it's like we're spot on time here. For our future classes, I'm happy to keep doing these things again with different books as well. But we see this in the next chapter. The Israelites again did what was offensive to the Lord, Ehud now being dead. Israelites really need a leader who can keep them on some moral path and moral compass. When that's gone, they quickly fall apart and do things that seem to be offensive to the Lord. And Lord then surrenders them to the king, Gavin of Canaan, who reigned in Chatzor. His army commander was Sisera, who was based in Harosheth Goyim.
So basically, they continued to act this way until 586.
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
Time and time again. This is the pattern that we see in the book of Judges. We have leader rise up and get rid of the foreign king, but then it goes down again. And what does that look like? And how are the Israelites moving forward to build up that sense of national identity? And to be honest, we can get into the next book of Samuel, and we see the same thing again.
Right. And in Kings, it's the same thing too.
Right. And I think it's one of the questions the biblical scholars will ask is, really, do we ever have a unified kingdom? Or are we just always showing vignettes from different tribes? And as having Judah and the northern tribes might have actually just been how everyone was associated. And having the claim of the brothers is really a way to try and ban the different territories, which very, very fraught to begin with.
So I don't know what the purpose is of having these stories. I mean, why should the Lord keep helping us out? I mean, he seems to get angry, so we suffer, then we say, help us, he comes and helps us, it just goes over and over again. So why here do we read this over? What is this supposed to tell us now?
Right.
Once would have been enough, but it's over and over and over again. It's sort of like, it doesn't matter because you're going to fail anyway. Your people before you've always failed, always gone, straight, and it will keep happening over and over again.
Right.
Demoralizing. It's sort of like, why do we?
Right. No, you're right.
What is this supposed to teach us? It's not good.
I think sometimes it's not, so to speak, about finding that change of being reliant on others. I think we have to figure out a way from within ourselves of how can we rise up over those shortcomings. And we can't just put our faith and all our eggs in a basket of a leader. We have to empower bodies to connect together. That's my general takeaway.
But it also shows that we weren't very tolerant. It seems like when we would come and people wanted to, well, I guess you're saying it was just us. Okay. No, I was going to say, it seemed like when we captured a land, and you had people there that were worshiping their gods, we said, well, forget that. You obviously don't know better. Right? And a lot of those people were just kind of killed.
Well, but the purpose was so that they would not be led astray.
But
that we would not be led.
Yeah, I could see us not being led astray, but why kill the other people?
Because they were going to lead us astray.
Oh.
Yeah.
And we don't have enough.
Yes, willpower.
We don't have enough willpower.
Obviously.
So obviously we have to kill everybody. Oh, no.
Yeah, well.
That's another reason. No, sorry. I don't go with that.
So I'll put it this way: when you have an organization that you move into, is it easier to reconstitute a staff, or to work with what you have and you move them in a new direction?
Right.
And I think some people would say, no, I want to bring my own people in. I want to have a clean slate. But that doesn't mean that the organization is the same thing, the same as it was before. The name may be the same, but and there might be a similar mission or motto, but how does that continue?
Yeah, my experience is that doesn't work.
Right.
That leaders that come in and do that are not successful. Because one is what you mentioned earlier is the culture.
Mm-hmm.
The culture that was there. People tend to resent all these newcomers that come in.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
There it is. As I'm typing it, because it's been bothering me. It's culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yes, that's what it is.
Ah.
Right, that's what it is.
Exactly.
And who said that?
I bet it's Cotter or.
Is that Cotter?
Yes, it could be Cotter.
Okay.
I happen to be reading Cotter right now.
So are we.
Oh, you are too?
No, so I have some of the audiobooks of Cotter's The Iceberg is Melting, and the one about the otters, That's Not How We Do Things Around Here. So we were listening to the audiobook in my car with the kids of the penguins, which is Our Iceberg is Melting. And it's been fascinating. So our 8.5-year-old has really gravitated to this whole story.
Oh,
it's
really?
terrible. And he's like, well, yeah, Alice needs to get everyone to understand that there's a problem with the ice flow. And he completely gets it, which to me is fascinating to see how simple Cotter made the theory of these things, the theories of change, palatable to the masses. So until the library opens,
I'm reading it's sort of a reprint of his famous 1992, I think, book on the 8 steps of change.
Got it.
And in the very beginning, it's you need to show that there's an urgency.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2 is you need to have a sort of a guiding policy, and number 3, most important, is you have to have a group of people who are then going to go out and convince everybody that there's a need for this change and that we can't continue to do what we've been doing before.
Exactly. So I will say, so then the Penguin book takes that. Is basically a parable version of that work. So I can send you a link over to it. Got it from the library. And now that everything is shut down for a little bit, I think we have a little bit of extra license.
Yeah.
I understand you have a brother who's an actuary.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, so I'm president-elect of the Society of Actuaries.
Ms. Alto. So when do you start?
Well, I became president-elect in October, and I will become president this coming October.
Okay.
And then I'll serve a third year as past president. But
Okay.
as president-elect, I'm on the board, and what we're looking at right now is the urgency of what's the actual profession going to look like
Okay.
5 to 10 years with so much change coming from artificial intelligence and
Right.
data science and so on.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Awesome.
So should we start on chapter 4, preparing for next week? Or?
Well, you have another class in the 2
Yeah.
days.
So let me put together some things, and I'll send it over to you as something else to take a look at.
Thank you.
If there's any topics that you would like us to cover as the Jacksonville Jewish Center in this time period, we are really trying to put together a robust virtual learning experience for everyone.
Well, good.
So really,
Yes.
if there's any topics that you would like, I'm happy to bring that to our team. I know we're looking at some things for Pesach already.
Rabbi Lebliner has, from time to time, has his Talmud class. We could probably do that soon.
I will mention that to him.
Yes.
We
yes.
did that with Rabbi Ackerman, our synagogue we belong to in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Does Talmud now 2 nights a week.
Got it. Which nights is he on?
He's doing Monday night and Wednesday night. So,
Okay. All right. So if you want to have a doubleheader on a Monday night, I'll talk to make it happen for you.
Actually, what time did you do it? Actually, was it 7 or 9?
We ended it.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. We the 2 synagogues, we're having a hard time remembering where to go to tune in at the right time.
But I think what you with Clay Coders are doing is terrific.
All right. No, my pleasure. We'll see what's happening.
All right.
So
All
we'll
right.
see you in a couple of days.
Absolutely. We'll see you in a bit.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks,
Take
Jeff.
care. Pleasure. Be well.
Yes, you too.
Thank you.